In this tutorial, we're going to be talking about functions and lists. At the end of this tutorial, you should know what functions are, and you also know why we use functions and how to use functions. You should also know what modules are used for and how to use them. Then the last thing we're going to go through are lists. What are lists? Why do we use lists? And how to use them. I hope you will find this tutorial very helpful. Now let's begin. Today we're going to be talking about functions and lists. We have already mentioned that functions are pre-written scripts that are used to simplify our code. Another definition is that a function is a collection of program statements that perform a specific task. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create your own functions. Now, why would we want to create our own functions? Well, functions make our code shorter and allows us to fix bugs easily. I will show you an example now. But first, let's go through some of the concepts. Let's talk about a module. Remember, we've already mentioned that a module or modules store functions. So before we create a function, we need to create a module to save it in. We create a module by simply opening a new script. Another thing to know is that everything in a function will temporarily be saved, and after the execution it will be lost. Now let us have a look at an example. Okay, in this example I'm going to show you why we need to use a function, and I will also show you how to create your own function inside Python. So I've done as an example already. I've already created an example. So say for example we have a class, and in this class we have test results. In line 24 I defined a new list. I call it list of results. So these are results of the test that, say for example, a class got. So here we have 6 learners. The first one got 17, the second one got 45, the third one got 18, and so forth. In line 27 I'm defining a new list where I'm gonna store the percentage. So what we are trying to do here is to calculate the percentage of the test score. So for the score 17, or for the result 17, I want to calculate what is the percentage. And we know that in order to calculate a percentage, we need the total. So in line 30, I define what the total is. In this case, the test was out of 50, so our total will be out of 50. Then in line 32, I am creating a for loop. In this for loop, I will iterate all the values inside my list of results, and then I'm going to calculate the percentage for each score inside the list of results. In line 36, I'm simply appending this percentage inside this new list. So now let's go ahead and run the function. Let's go ahead and run the script. As you can see in the results, we have our results here, and for the first test score 17 we have its percentage, then so forth and so forth for 24 and 96 as well. So that is how we use this script. Now this script is very long. Okay, perhaps it's not that long. However, we want to make it short. What if we could make this script 2 lines short? I think that would be very great, because it will save us memory space. And that is very helpful. You always want to make your code as short as possible. So remember, we said we use functions to make our code shorter, and also it allows us to solve bugs easily. So if we save our script and we want to use it after 3 months and we can't remember what we were doing, if we defined a function and we know exactly what each function does, it will allow us to solve the problem easily. So now let's go ahead and create a small function that will allow us to write or to run this script with only just 2 lines. So before we create a function, we need to create a new module. Now I've already created a module called functions. Now let us create our own new module. So here we create a new module. So here we create a new module. In this new module, we have to define our function. The way in which we do that, we type in def, which will turn into blue to indicate that it is a Python built-in function. So now what we're going to do, we're going to say def, and then we're going to define what our function name will be. We can see that we've typed in our name of our function, which will be %. Now we need to define what our percentage or our function will take. In this case, it will take in two arguments, that is test list and total. Test list will be the list of scores that have been stored inside a list, and total will be the total that the test was out of. For example, it was out of 50. So remember, it takes in two arguments, the test list and also the total. That is the total that the test was out of. So let's go ahead and define our function. We're going to define the same scripts that we used in our previous example. So let's go ahead and define it. Now, after we've created our module and our function inside our module, we need to save the script, i.e. our module. So we need to save our module the same directory as where we're going to run our script. So for me, I'm going to save it in desktop, and I'm going to save our module or our script as my function so that I can better remember it. Now I'm going to go ahead and save it in desktop. Now, after defining our function, we need to save it before we can execute it. Now, another thing you need to keep in mind is that the script we're going to run and the module that we defined, we need to save it in the same location. So in my case, I'm going to save it in desktop. I'm going to save the module in desktop as testing functions. After saving our module, let's go ahead to our testing functions where we are going to test our function that we have just defined. Now, before we execute our function, we need to import our module first. Remember, our module name is my function. So we're going to go ahead and type import, and then after that, we're going to type in the name of our module, and that is the name that we want to import. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, now that we have imported our module, now we're going to access the function inside our module. So the way in which we do that, in line 13, we're first going to type in the name of our module, then we're going to type in the period character, and then it will show us a list of functions that are inside our module. Now, since we only have one function inside our module, we should only see one function, and that is percentage. Then we're going to click on that percent, and then after that we see that it only takes in two arguments, that is my list and also the total. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in those two arguments. So the way in which I'm going to do that, I'm going to copy the list of results, that variable, and I'm going to paste it inside my function, and then we're going to execute it, then run it and see what will be the results. So because it takes in two arguments, the second argument that we're going to fill in will be our total. In this case, our total is 50. 50 is what the test was out of, so we're going to put in 50. We can also see the results here at the bottom. They're exactly the same as the previous example, but the difference now is that we only used 2 lines of code instead of 7 or 10 lines of code. Now that we are done using our function, let me show you another feature of functions. That is, we can use a function to return a value. So what we just did now on our function, we just printed the value after calculating it. Say for example, we want to return a value. Now the way in which we do that, we have to use the return function. If we go to our function again and type in return, and instead of saying print, we type in return, then it's going to return the new value instead of printing the value. Now let's go ahead into our testing script to see what will happen. Let's say first of all we do the exact same thing. We just write in my function and then the function, and then we don't click on print. We see that the results is nothing because it didn't print anything. We have removed the printing function. Now we're going to type in print, and instead we're going to define a new variable called results. So our value will be stored inside results. And then now we're going to print results. If we run this code, we're going to see that it's going to print the results. So that is how we actually define functions, and that is how we use functions. I hope now you have a better understanding of how to create functions, or how to define them, how to create modules, and why we use functions. So now we're going to be talking about list. A list is a data type that can store other values. The values could be numbers or strings or even other lists. We use list to store multiple values. Say for example, the test result of a class. Now, how do we create list? I'm sure you've seen in my previous videos creating list. It's very simple to create list. There's actually a few ways in which we can create list. One is by actually creating an empty list first, then filling out the values manually. The second option is to use the range function. The third option is by using the append function, and I'm going to show you an example of that just now. So here I'm firstly going to define a new list. I'm going to call it my list. Then I'm going to type in equals to the operator. Then I'm going to type in square brackets. Then I'm going to manually fill in the list. Now let's print out the list and see what will be the result. Another option is using the range function. So if we type in my list equals to, then we type in range, we see it's gonna turn to sort of purple to indicate that it's a Python built-in module. Then we type in shift, open brackets, then for example we're gonna type in from 1 to 6. So what the range function will do, it will create a list for me starting from the value 1 up until 5. We can clearly see the results now. It created values between 1 and 5. Another thing to note about a range function is that it will create a list of values between the first value you specified up until the second last value you specified. So because I specified from 1 until 6, it's gonna create a list of values between 1 to 5. If I specified 8, it was going to create values between 1 and 7. So the last value will always be the second last value inside the value that you specified. Now I'm going to show you a list. Say for example we want our list to increment by 2 instead of 1. By default the range function is set to increment by 1. However, we can change the increments by specifying 3 arguments. So the first argument is where your list you want it to start. So in this case I want it to start at 2, and then the second argument is where you would like it to end. Remember we said that it's going to end at the second last value that you specified. So if I specify 12, it's going to end at 10. That is if the increments are 2. If the increments are 1, then I specify 10, then it means it's going to end at 9. But for this example I'm going to specify 12. And then the third argument that it's going to take is the increment. In this case, I wanted to increment it by 2 times, so I'm going to specify 2. This expression should give me a list of values between 1 until 10. So let's go ahead and run the program. We can clearly see in the result that our values start from 2 up until 10. Now, what if we use 1 as an increment instead? This will be the result. It's going to end at the second last value, which is 11 instead of 12. So the third option we can use is by using the append function. First, we defined an empty list, then we use the append function. So the way in which we do that, we need to type in the name of our list, then we're going to type in the character, period, and then after that we're going to click on the list of functions that are available. We're going to click on append, then we're going to append, say for example with 1, and then after 1 we're going to do 2 and then 3. We can clearly see that it appends our list by the value that we specify every time. So that is how we create a list using the append function. Now that we know how to create list, how do we use list? So now I'm going to show you how to access a value inside a list. Now, before I do that, I need to explain something very important. That Python always starts its index from the location 0. So, for example, the first value inside my list, its location it's 0 instead of 1. Then the second value, which is 4, its location is 1. Then the third value, which is 5, its location index is 2. So Python always starts its index from 0. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values. We have 5 values inside our list, and the indexing starts from 0, and then the last location will be 4, because Python's index starts at 0. That is very important for you to know, especially working with the list. So if I want the last value in my list, the location will be 4. Now, in order for us to access a value inside a list, we need to type in the list, then we're going to type in square brackets, and inside the square brackets we're going to fill in the location that we want the value for. For example, if we want the last location, we're going to type in my list, then square brackets, and then inside the square brackets we're going to put in the value 4. If we run the script, we see the value is 10. That is our last location. We can also do that for our first location. Our first location will be 0. So now that we know how to access value inside our list, how about we change values inside our list? The way in which we do that is in a similar way. First of all, we type in the name of our list, then we type in square brackets, and inside the square brackets we put in the location which we want to change the value. So for example, if we want to change the value of the first location, which in our case is 2. So if we want to change 2 to the number 10, we first need to specify its location. And the way in which we do that, we type in our list, square brackets, then we put in its location, and its location is 0. Then we're going to say it's equals to 10, and then that means that we are changing the value of the first location inside our list into 10. So let's go ahead and run the script. We can clearly see the results here. It has changed the value from 2 to 10. And that is how we change values inside a list. We can even change another index. Say for example, we want to change the number 5. We can also do it in a similar way. Remember, we need to find out what is its location. We said Python always starts its index from 0. So if we start counting at 2, it's 0, 4 will be 1, and 5 will be 2. So the index location of the value 5 is 2. So in order to change the value 5, we need to type in my list, square brackets, and type in 2. Say for example, we want it to be equals to 18. Then we're going to type in 18, and then we're going to run it and see what will be the result. So that is how we change values inside list. Now, list also comes with their own functions. Now, the way in which to access the functions inside a list is very simple. We simply need to type in the name of our list, then we're going to type in the period character, then it'll give us a list of functions, just like the append function. Instead, there are many different functions we can use for our specific list. In this example, I'm going to show you how to use the sorting function. So we're going to scroll down to sort, we're going to select it. Now, the sorting function simply arranges our values inside our list from ascending order. So it will sort it from the smallest to the largest. So let's go ahead and use the list the sorting function of our list and see what will be the result. If we use the sorting function, we see it arranges the values from smallest to largest. It starts with 4, 7, 10, 10, and then 18, even though the way we defined our list is not like that. So we can use many functions inside our list by simply clicking the dot after specifying the name of our list. Now I'm going to show you a list that contains strings. Remember, we said that lists can contain numbers, strings, or even lists. Now I'm going to show you an example where I use strings inside my list. So now that we've defined the strings inside our list, now we can print them, or we can even print the list, or we can access them just like we did with numbers. So for example, I can access the location, or I can access the first value inside my list. And the way in which we do that is exactly the same as when we were working with numbers. So I'm simply going to type in my list, then the location value I want to access. So in this case, I want to access the first location, which is the name Jeff. I'm simply going to type in my list, then square brackets, and inside those square brackets, I'm going to type in the number 0, which is our first location. Remember, we said that Python starts counting from the number 0. So our first index in our list will be 0. So we're going to type in 0 in our square brackets, and it should give us the name Jeff. So let's go ahead and run the script. So this is how we work with lists inside of Python. I hope now you know how to create a list, how to work with lists, how to access values, and what type of values you can store inside of lists.